Okay, well, welcome, Amelia. We're just delighted to have you here today, and we always start with a reminder of our predicament. We always talk about the three parts of our predicament: the fact that the biosphere is endangered, our democracy is endangered, and our humanity itself is appears to be endangered too. So that's what we're up against, and we're talking to people about all of this, and we're we're just delighted to have you here. And we typically begin by talking about history and background, and I'm curious to hear about your earliest memories about your, you might say, awakening to our planetary predicament and how you chose to take responsibility and to become involved in all this.
For sure. Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here. I think some of the first memories I have learning about climate change and how crazy this, predicament is that you talked about. We're in school, so a little bit in elementary school, but definitely middle school, I remember. But it was very much taught as, the adults have it covered. Like it is an issue, but the adults are working on it. It's fine. There's like some policy being passed, and as long as you turn your lights off, shut the fridge, and don't use single-use plastics, it'll be fine. Like, don't worry. And then one day after school, I really love watching documentaries. I have for a while, so I don't know, making dinner or something, and I was home alone, and I turned on Greta Thunberg's documentary, I Am Greta, and realized that the adults do not have it covered, and we're gonna need a lot more complex solutions um, to heal this predicament. So. After I watched that documentary, I started getting really anxious, and I started doing a bunch of research and reading all of these things. And then I found Fridays for Future and got connected with that, and then they just like opened up the whole network for me.
Nice. Well, a lot of people have seen the same information and the same documentary and let it go by and chose not to get involved. But there's something about you and your personal life. You said, I want to take responsibility for this and I want to take action. Do you remember having that thought, having that feeling?
Yeah, I mean, I think once I learned how bad it was, I like that knowledge is so heavy. I don't think I could have just ignored it or not done anything. I don't see any other alternative after knowing all of the super terrible things that are going on than taking action and trying to help. And I think that looks different for a lot of different people. But for me, that was going online, doing my research, and getting connected with current orgs.
Nice, nice. So, what about the state of activism in the world right now, in general, but then in particular, youth activism? What are you seeing right now? We took a big hit with Trump 2.0. I think a lot of people are exhausted and a lot of people are struggling to get their feet on the ground. What are you seeing amongst other activists?
Yeah, I think that's a complicated question because there's so many different spaces and so many um, different parts of activism. I think specifically youth activism. Um, we, the youth activists that there are, were working in a ton of different spaces. Like the youth activists I know are passionate about so many different things that it's hard for us sometimes. My dog is barking. It's hard for us sometimes to focus on one thing when we know that it's all so connected. So that's one thing. We're burnt out from that and burnt out from having the burden of trying to fix all these issues. Trump 2.0 is a real thing, but a lot of the activists I know have seen this coming for a while. And even though Trump is really bad, we've always been under the impression that no politician is coming to save us. We're going to have to figure out some sort of solution no matter who's in office. It's a lot harder with Trump, don't get me wrong. But yeah, so I think because of Trump, there's a little bit of a discouragement, but there's also this huge wave of energy that not just activists are having, just like a bunch of people in the US and outside of the US are like, oh my gosh, we should do something. And I think it's really important that we we kind of figure out how to direct that energy because right now it is in protesting. We're having like 50-51 protests all the time and it's super awesome. But we've learned from past movements that we need something more than protests too. We need an end goal to so that we can use the protest as a tool to get to that end goal. Um, so yeah, that's a long answer. I don't know if it actually answers the question,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
it's complicated.
Nice, nice. Well, in our last conversation, we talked about how this is a lot bigger than climate, and what you're starting to see are connections to, for example, Gaza and imperialism in general. And that seems to be a common theme now. And that's something that you're on top of.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if anybody's on top of it, honestly. Like it's still happening. There's really powerful people with a lot of money driving these things. So, and there's a very well-founded system that's extremely corrupt that's also driving it. So, um yeah, I mean just in the really prominent youth activists like Greta Thunberg right now is sailing to Gaza to try to, bring in aid. Anuna de Wever from Belgium, she's, you know, been working on Palestine liberation for a couple years now. So all of these climate activists who were really big in 2018, 2019, are now like focusing more maybe on the genocide. And I think that's because they're seeing that, and my generation is seeing that climate change is directly involved with genocide because it's the same system. It's the same system that's oppressing the global south, but also in a way oppressing us. So yeah, I mean, it's really connected. That's kind of part of what I was saying too with my generation, our activists being in a lot of different spaces because we see that it's so connected. Um, yeah.
Nice, nice. JLo, looks like Jennifer may have some
Might,
computer issue at her
might be
end.
frozen. Yeah. Oh,
Yeah. Oh, maybe she's coming back.
there she is.
Oh, we
All
got
right.
you now. Yeah.
Welcome back.
So,
Yeah. So
JLo, what are you thinking?
I'm
Well,
very
yeah.
interested. Oh, Jennifer, do you want to go ahead? Go ahead.
No, you go ahead, JLo. I'm sorry, I'm having a little bit of Wi-Fi issue for some reason.
Okay. Okay, no problem. So, Amelia, I agree with you 100%. And I'm very interested to understand, having just spent some time with my niece, very interested to understand how you and your cadre of people that are working for Fridays for Future and so forth see the interconnectedness, but also the priority of things, right? So, just to set the table in a sense, that when someone comes into the ER, maybe they were out on their bike and they get in an accident, they may have a broken bone, but if they hit their head, the head's more important than the broken bone. Although they're both connected, we have to solve both, right? So, how do we do that? And so, I'm curious to know what you think our generation should be prioritizing in order to support the future for your generation.
Yeah, that's a great question. Um, I think the beauty of having all these issues be so interconnected is that um we can be in the different spaces and then hopefully find a way to still be connected on the back end. So I think there's so many head injuries. Like there's a lot of people that just came into the ER with some concussions and worse, you know? So there are people fighting the fires in the different spaces. There are people getting in there and fixing the tumor. Um, and I think something that we need to learn, and maybe I think something that your generation can help us with is staying connected on the back end and making sure that we're communicating throughout the different spaces and even within like the climate space or the Palestine space or the women's rights or, whatever. Making sure that we're a united thing that is fighting this system on the different levels. Um, yeah, I don't know. Does that answer your question? Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, Amelia, I'm wondering, you probably have heard about the young people were arrested in a Quaker meeting in London simply for planning a climate action without actually having taken any action. And we know theoretically in the US, a thought cannot be a crime. You have to actually do something. But it seems like punitive behavior towards activists is something that's really on the increase. What do you want to say about that?
Yeah, I mean, I would say direct callback to the 1968 DNC, where they did take action, but that trial in Chicago was very much punishing people for their thoughts. So I think, yeah, terrible, should not happen. It has happened before, and we have fought it. So I think activism and raising our voices is one of the most important things. It's hard, because I think in some cases people do need to be willing to get arrested. And people are willing to get arrested. There are definitely those orgs out there. I think it's also important we have spaces where activism is really accessible. I think it's really important to have local organizations who are having peaceful protests so that the next generation can come to those and be like, this is awesome. Like, I should do this. It's important to have really peaceful spaces where everybody can feel safe and welcome. And then it's also important to take that um, more risky action. And I think as far as, yeah, just being punished for thought, I don't even know. That's crazy. Um, yeah, that's something that honestly, like I'm gonna do action and activism and raise my voice no matter what. And I know that there's a bunch of activists who will do that even if there's the danger of being punished for doing it. Um, yeah, I don't, I don't know if that's a reasonable answer.
Yeah, well, I think it kind of points to a concept that I think is important. We talk about how important biodiversity is for the natural world, but there's also a necessity, I think, for biodiversity of emotion. We have to allow for people who feel upset and want to peacefully protest, or people who feel angry and want to protest in a more, in a stronger way, and just make sure there's space for all of those things. I mean, they really speak to different people's strengths and how they want to express themselves. And I think it relates to mental health, which you talked about, in the beginning. I mean, Greta Thunberg has talked about, one of the things we can do for eco anxiety is to engage in some kind of action so we don't feel disempowered. And so I don't know how you want to kind of expand on that, but that's occurred to me.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I don't know if you've seen that scale of green actions to red actions, and then in the middle it's yellow, but that's like definitely we need actions on the whole scale. In order we need all the actions in order to make change. Eco anxiety is a real thing. Um, and in pretty much every space, every org I've been in, we've been like, your health is number one. And your mental health is number one, your physical health is number one. So please take time to help yourself and heal yourself if you need to, because you cannot be a productive activist or make productive change if you're not humaning um, productively or correctly. So Yeah, I that's a huge thing. And almost every single activist I know, even though we say, like, take the time you need to, put yourself first, a lot of times we don't. Um, and it's a really hard thing because I know I say it to everyone I onboard that, it's so important to take time for yourself and to heal your mental and physical health, but I don't. Like, like it's really hard. And that is 100% something I'm still working on because I want to do this work for the rest of my life. Um, and I need to figure out how to do it sustainably.
Nice. Well, I would like to talk a little bit about one of my pet peeves, which is the media and the absence of reporting on the depth, the severity, the magnitude, the gravity of our predicament. And it just seems like one of our guests called it the great silence, because there's these facts on the ground that are super urgent, not getting reported on, and it's almost like we're willfully turning our heads away. So what do you think about the media and getting a voice out there?
Yeah, it's hard because a lot of media and news outlets are um for profit and wanting to get the clicks. And the fact of the matter is that climate change and climate activism is not in anymore. It used to be very trendy and it's not trendy. Um, so when Greta was doing her thing in 2018, 2019, it was very trendy. A lot of people were doing it, and now it's just not. Um, so I think that's one thing. I don't know how to create a trend again. But yeah, maybe we can figure out how to do that. And another thing, like the media has a lot of other things to cover. And I think at this point, most people know, if they're not a climate denier, most people know that climate change is real and it's bad. And they're just like, I don't even, like, I can't anymore. Like, I know it's bad. I just need to live my life. Um, which I think is definitely plays into barriers to activism, like feeling overwhelmed, not having enough time, not feeling like enough to be a part of the movement. So I'm really talking about things that we could do, but I think things media could do is start diversifying their climate or start reporting on climate in general. But also I think to get the clicks, if you will, um, reporting on places all over the world that are experiencing climate and natural disasters and stuff, but also not just focusing on natural disasters, bringing climate change into the other things that they are reporting on. So bringing climate change into the Gaza conversation, bringing climate change into abortion and how women are disproportionately affected. So bringing the predicament into the other stories that are getting more clicks, I think is a really great way to start integrating um, it back into the media again.
Nice.
Yeah, that makes sense to me, Amelia, because everything is connected, right? Like the greenhouse gas emissions from war are insane through the roof. And then AI is being used to power war by automating targeting and things like that. And AI is a huge destructive force within the movement for planetary health. So I think it's really important what you're saying about just trying to make those connections every time we talk about these issues. I'm curious what you think about this phenomenon of hypernormalization, which is the idea that, these very distressing social conditions are just being hypernormalized to the point that people are being desensitized, and overwhelm is actually a tool that's being weaponized to kind of force people into hypernormalization because they can no longer cope.
Hmm.
What
Hmm.
do you think about that?
Yeah, it's a real thing. And I think also a real thing for people to get news burnout and just not, like you were saying, getting overwhelmed and just not wanting to learn anymore. Um, I like truly think this is cheesy, but I like truly think activism is the key to solving that. Like being a part of a space where honestly we are still learning things about climate change and we're integrating that into our activism, but all of us know that it's bad and now we're just doing things about it. Um, so I think getting into activism is the key to getting over that overwhelm. And it is, like you're saying, it's a real thing that's being weaponized. Um, and I think that's wrong. And I think, it comes back to, again, getting the clicks and getting the profit. And, the big billionaire execs are the ones who end up getting a lot of that money. So just, yeah, find a news source if you want to that seems appropriate for you. Um, Turn off the notifications from that news source so you don't get all those breaking news things all the time. I had my notifications turned on the first few weeks of the Trump second coming, and it was just so much, and I had to turn it off. Um, but yeah, this is getting off topic, but like support public media. Um, and yeah, be a part of something bigger. Go to events that are like do action items, take action. That I know there's blockers. Like I promise, I know there's blockers to being an activist and taking action, but there's so many different ways to do it. And like I guarantee there is one way to be an activist and to take action that fits into your life.
Nice.
Yeah, two things. One is that I don't think I agree with you 100% about overwhelm and everything else. The human mind and brain and body system and neurology was not designed for this constant flooding of the zone of crazy and overwhelm and stress. And so that's part of their whole program, right? So I guess what I would like to say is, there is no better voice to a parent than their child, right? I mean, parents will listen and eventually it'll stick, right? What would you tell your peers to say to people, Jennifer, Franks, and my age? What would you tell your people in their late teens and 20s to say to people our age about what's going on and how you want us to act and what you want us to do?
Nice.
Yeah, that's a hard question
Okay.
because I know my peers and a lot of them aren't activists or are, focused elsewhere. So I guess I would say number one, like it's hard to expect activism from an entire generation when the issues are so big. So if they can muster up the courage or the time or the energy to say anything, I think I don't I like your guys' generation has made mistakes 100%, but your activism generation has been through a lot of stuff. And I think we can learn so much from you. So, um, I would encourage my generation to listen to what you have to say to us, and also to say, like, yeah, Democrats aren't the answer to everything. There's a lot of really terrible politicians. Like, policy is amazing, and we need to keep working in policy, but we also need to diversify our actions. No politician, like I said, is coming to save us. We need to work in a lot of different ways with a lot of different people. So support us in that. And yeah, come to our events. Give us grants if you have them.
Exactly. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Nice. Nice.
I almost think it's interesting because it's like there was a period of relative calm. And so it's not like activism ever went away, but in some respects, it like skipped a generation because my dad's generation was busy out on the street for civil rights and, very, that it was very much integrated into the everyday, right? And how is it going to show up for us today? It would have been very prevalent for him for multiple decades. Um, and I heard somebody kind of making a point the other day that people are always, poo-pooing activism. Oh, it's sort of so passé. And this woman said, that's right. It's never accomplished anything except civil rights and gay rights and women's rights. So it's like we tend to kind of, or not those of us here on this call, but society tends to diminish activism and the power behind activism for transformative change just because it's convenient for society, because society, loves the status quo and doesn't like change so much. So I think, I think if you go slightly farther back than the three of us on this call, you've got a great warehouse of, activism that's available, like you mentioned, 1968 convention. So I think that's important. But I also, when I heard you speaking, Amelia, I almost felt like I could substitute the word community for activism while you were talking, because I felt that was the feeling I was getting, that you're saying, there's something for everyone here because there's community here. And it made me kind of wonder too, for your generation, is activism kind of the antidote to the attention economy, which is so isolating for people and such an alienating force?
Yeah, I think activism is an antidote for a lot of things. Um, I think the attention economy is so crazy. And it's such a huge, huge thing, just like so many of other things. Um, I think like at its core, the antidote for it is going outside and reading a book and creating community. Um, and a lot of those things can lead to activism. And I think maybe part of the reason you were talking about, Jennifer, why society is so like cynical about activism maybe is because I think the definition of activism gets a little muddled. People have this very clear idea, especially of climate activism, of people tying themselves to a tree and not eating for 3 days, and then like I don't know, not wearing shoes and not, yeah. There's a very clear picture in society of what a climate activist is, and it's changed. Um, a lot of climate activists I know have not touched grass in months. Um, and I would love for, all of us to just go on a hike together and be like, here's what we're saving. But, the fact of the matter is so many climate activists are in the policy space or um, I don't know, having conversations like this. And activism has truly changed um, in a lot of ways. So I think, yeah, community and having a lot of different things for people to do and ways for them to get engaged is a great way to interact with the newer activism. Did that answer your question? There was a lot of good stuff there that you just said.
Nice, nice. Well, I have a question about messaging and what to lead with. Because when Greta came on the scene, and then a few years after that, there was a lot of messaging that was highly urgent. And it was like, Greta wants us to panic. Greta wants us to really move now because this is an emergency and we've really got to mobilize. And that was one messaging. I've got a friend who's a spiritual teacher, and he's a climber in Yosemite, actually. And his take on this whole thing is that People need to stop being so afraid. People need to calm down. And when I listen to him, I'm thinking, he's right too. And if people did calm down, we could come up with more creative and effective solutions. So there's this tension between those two poles, between the urgency message and the calm down message. How do we navigate those two bits of wisdom?
Yeah. I mean, I would love to hear all your thoughts on this, but I think it's it's hard because it still is an emergency. That hasn't gone away. It's still very, very much urgent. And there is something to taking a second and making sure that you're doing the right thing. Um, I think it's a balance, honestly. Like
Mhm.
there there needs to be both. I think messaging wise, like what we put out into the public and what we're sharing with other people, I think maybe more urgent might work a little better. But I also don't know because like Jennifer was saying, people are kind of desensitized um and don't really respond to that anymore. So, yeah, what do you guys think?
One of the things I think is that I cannot influence anyone's opinion unless I have a relationship with them. If I'm just spewing data and information at people, um, that's not a way to connect necessarily. It's important, it's a piece of the puzzle, but it's not necessarily a way to connect with somebody. And change usually comes from feelings, not information, right? It comes from feelings and beliefs, not information. And beliefs don't always match information. In fact, it can be the opposite. So there's just a way in which I feel like building connection and relationship are two primary keys. We can do it through community, we can do it one-on-one, but it's hard to change behavior. You have to influence not just minds, but hearts. So that's one of the things that comes to mind.
Yeah, I would agree, and I would also say that you have to speak in someone's language, right? So there's three major worldviews in play right now, right? That's the conservative worldview, the modern worldview, what we call the green or the postmodern worldview. And if we start trying to force a worldview down someone's throat that they're just not going to buy, no matter how close of friendships we have, they're just not going to bite. They're not going to agree. And you have to put things in other people's values. You have to put things in the framework of their values, their worldview, and make it make sense to them. And use their kind of steel man them, if you will, as the term goes, and use their worldview as a way of communicating the feelings of it. And then ask a lot of questions from their point of view, using their worldview and their frame. That's what I would think might be worth a try.
Yeah, the other thing that comes up here, Amelia, I've noticed you're quite fluent with this word both. And that's such an important word right now because we're on the crux of so many dilemmas. And a lot of times we go into either or thinking it's got to be this way or this way. And using the word both is powerful. It also suggests that the answer, if you will, is to conduct ourselves with equipoise or equanimity, balance, all of these things that are ancient, like martial art ideas, because here we go into this highly ambiguous future. We don't know what's going to happen, but we can point ourselves toward equipoise and high function even in that condition. So the word both, I think, is wonderful.
Yeah, for sure. I appreciate that because I'm normally a pretty black and white thinker. It's hard for me to get out of that space sometimes, so I'm trying to use the word both more. Um, and I think something that you said earlier, Frank, when you were asking the question, you said the urgency it like instills fear almost, and I think It's a really important point because I think there's a way that we can make our messaging still urgent, but instead of fear, have it be hopeful. So I think we can make people bold and um, make people feel like they can make a difference like despite the urgency. And it's a fine line, but I think that that messaging can be really powerful.
Have you ever heard this old parable? They say that hope makes a horrible breakfast, but makes a great supper. And
I've
the
not
idea
heard that.
is that it's totally folly to be hopeful before you do the work. It's like you do the work, you go out in the field, you do the crops, you do whatever needs to be done, and at the end of the day, you're hopeful about tomorrow. And that I kind of like that approach.
Totally. I mean, Greta talks about all the time, like people who are just not really doing anything or sitting on their couch or not worrying about the climate crisis, looking to my generation and our generation, to find hope. And she's like, you guys aren't like, I shouldn't be your hope. That's really bad if an 18-year-old in my case is your source of hope. So yeah, I think it's really important to tell people that they are able to make change. And from that work that they will then gain hope. Because it's
Mhm.
I was not very hopeful before I started um, engaging in activism.
Mhm.
And activism and doing work does give you hope.
Mhm.
Um, And hopefully it's not a false sense of hope. Hopefully you believe in the work you're doing and you actually believe that it can change things for the better.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think also part of hope is, as Frank says, we have to do the work, right? That's the work of activism. And I think you have to have a vision for what does the world look like when we get there? What does that future place look like, right? What does it look like? Because people need to be drawn to something from where they are to something rather than just fighting against what we don't want. So we have to be going for what we want, and that includes the both, right?
Definitely. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting when I hear all of you talking. This is part of the modern condition is that we think that it's a point of privilege to offload work you don't want to do to somebody else. But it's such I always kind of feel very cringy when somebody my age, kind of somewhat, well-meaning, but actually, it doesn't come off very well. And they say, "Oh, it's so great what you people are doing, you younger people at XYZ." That's why, I'm quite happy with my children choosing to do something else that is also important to them, but me not kind of projecting onto them, "Oh, this is your issue, this is your responsibility," and in fact, I feel like it's mine. And I think that one of the things that happens when we offload responsibilities, we also offload our joy from doing that work, And one of the things about collapse awareness is that I think it gives us the opportunity to just decide, oh, I'm going to be my full self and I'm going to be as happy as I'm able to be in this moment. That's part of what is available there. And, but if we try to put it out of our mind, then everything becomes avoidance instead of being in the
Mhm.
present and enjoying the life that we have right now. So there is a way that facing up to Earth polycrisis provides actually a lot of freedom and a lot of opportunities for engagement that are positive and not just this kind of, negative picture.
Absolutely. I learn something new every day that I do activism. I never thought I would be video editing and buying bubble machines, but like here I am. Um, And yeah, I mean that's another thing I would say to not you guys because you guys are great, but to your generation, is like yeah, find you it's not too late for you to take action. You can find your own hope. and your own joy, as you put it, Jennifer, and not just look to us and be like, good job, you guys. I mean, third act is a
Mhm.
great example of that,
Yep.
of older folks taking action themselves and not just putting it all on our generation.
Nice.
Appreciating the ER on that older.
You're welcome.
Yeah, yeah. So, what about Fridays for Future? What is happening at the national level and the international level right now?
Mm.
National and international level is um a mess. I mean,
Oh no.
yeah, no, I mean that's the story for every org at a national or international level. It's just it's a mess all the time. Um, National, we are looking for more local groups, looking for more people. We have a separate group from our local groups. Our local groups are our priority, and they are what, they're chapters of Fridays for Future around the country, so they take precedent for sure. Um, but we have this new group called NSPs, or National Support Positions,
Mm.
where it's people who are coming in right to the national level and to support these local groups. So I'm in a local group and I'm also an NSP. And so we're looking for more NSPs to join because it's really fun. It's a great group. And we get to do really cool things to help make change at a local level. So yeah, if you're interested in becoming an NSP, go to fridaysforfutureusa.org. Um, and yeah, I think national level and international level are really dealing with Trump right now. We're trying to figure out where we fit and what levers we can pull to make change and what things are just not worth our energy or our time. Which really sucks, but there are things that no matter how much we fight for, we can't change them. Because Trump is, uh, you know, just messing everything up. So we can maybe come back to those things once he's hopefully out of office, um, and try to fix those. But yeah, really nitpicking what and where we can best spend our energy and our capacity so that we make the most change and the most effective change.
Mhm.
Um, it's hard. It's really hard, but we're working on it.
Good.
There's another group that I have an interest in. It's called Teach the Future, and they're active in the UK. And the whole premise for their educational model is we have to teach young people to inhabit the near-term future. And so the model is very explicit about what is happening. And we don't see a model like that in the US. What do you think about education and the way it's being conducted right now?
Yeah, education is. I also want to hear your guys' thoughts on this, because I think education is so important. Um, it varies a lot, teacher to teacher, like how they talk about climate change and how they talk about the predicament. I 100% think that there should be a national education standard for climate education in all schools. That's something super important that a lot of great activists are working on right now. But I mean, education right now is 100% under attack. Um, I mean, we can look back at like Mao's China kind of area with the um what is it called? Cultural Revolution, where
Right.
he just like killed a bunch of teachers and burned a bunch of books, and that's what dictators do, and that's what authoritarian leaders do. They go after learning and education because knowledge is power, and not having knowledge gives power to the dictator. So w like it is still really important to go to school and to get an education, whether they're teaching climate in your school or not. Um, it's also important if they're not teaching climate in your school, if you don't feel like you're getting a good education, to look outside of your school and to do your own research. But yeah, education is so important. And if it was better, I think we would have more activists in this generation. Um, and if teachers were paid more, maybe they would talk about climate change more. I don't know. Like, the education system is definitely in that other system that is underfunded and needs help.
Mhm.
So what do you guys think?
Totally agree.
Yeah, I mean, I would love to see, um, Earth Poly Crisis curricula in K through 12 schools. But the truth is, we have trouble even getting that at the university level or at the professional education level, like for healthcare professionals and folks like that. And the political climate is not getting better in that direction. So, now, I mean, people have had their funding taken away for having, reference to climate crisis in their grants and institutes. So I think that's a little bit of a prolonged challenge to some degree. But I think we can still continue the conversation, even if it's not expressly labeled as such in the curriculum. And one of the ways I would love to see it happen, I'm curious what you think about this, Amelia, because you're maybe heading off to college, but the Climate Psychology Alliance has a climate cafe model that helps for people to process their emotions around climate anxiety and eco grief. And I don't know how much they do training people for peer to peer, but I would love to see more of that, like in peer situations in high schools and younger people, to kind of be able to traverse some of that, even when officially resources are not applied to do it. So I don't know if those of you in the activism space, in the youth activism space, really engage with climate cafes, but I hear you talking about overwhelm and, the certain amount of stress that goes with identifying as an activist. And it seems like a great kind of collaborative moment.
Yeah. Um, there's this organization called SAL, Sustaining All Life, and they're super great. Basically their mission is to like protect activists, but in their brains. This I'm saying this really terribly, but they look out for like activists' mental health, and they kind of give resources to keep activism sustainable. So they have this model of a circle or a conversation where I think it's like you can do it in however many, like whatever group you want to, however many people. And each person gets like 3 minutes to talk and nobody else talks. They just listen. And then another person talks and another person talks. And it doesn't have to be a response to what anybody else said. And then after, you can just have like a conversation of what resonated with me, like what did I not understand, or like what I think about. And it doesn't have to be about climate, because it can also be about your personal life, and how that is intertwined with your activism life, and then how that affects your climate activism. So I think that's a super important thing. And maybe even as we're talking about this, like social emotional learning in K through 12, I think could very easily go hand in hand with climate anxiety, and teaching about, yeah, how anxiety inducing our world is right now, and how to try to help us feel better and do better. Did
Nice.
that kind of, was that an adequate response? I want to go to JLo because I want to know what he
Yeah.
thinks.
Mhm.
Well, I agree a lot of what Jennifer said, first of all. And I think if I could add anything, it would be teaching emotional, psychological, and physiological self-regulation, right? Self-regulation is so key. If we don't have those tools, then we can't use them. And I think that when we've been able to teach those, especially on the physiological side, so we can reduce the tension and the stress and have means of conversation and have the words that we can use that help us do that in the communication. It's so powerful and so important. And it also keeps us from getting too flooded when we have those tools, right? And it also allows us to not be numbed down, because too often what we do under stress, and we found this in XR a huge amount, people got so overwhelmed with the data and the facts and the potential problems in the future that we're facing, that they emotionally shut down because they didn't have regulation tools. So to the extent that we can bring in these various tools that we're all talking about, bring those together and share those, I mean, that would be a really cool thing to have trainings for, elementary schools appropriately, of course, middle schools, high schools, colleges, universities, even workplaces, right? Why not? Because
Mhm.
this is a real thing. And the other thing I would say is just an awareness of how you feel when you're having those feelings, because a lot of people don't know what it means. So they try and find a coping mechanism, right? Alcohol, drugs, Netflix, YouTube, whatever, Instagram, TikTok. Those are means of expressing tension when we don't have the words or the other tools.
Absolutely. Very nice. Yeah. Well, we're coming up on our time, and sadly, I think we could talk for hours, but this has been a real pleasure, and I'm really, I'm really happy that you were able to join us, Amelia.
Me
Thank you
too.
so
Thank you
much.
guys so much for having me. You're all so smart and wise, and I'm so happy that I have all your knowledge in my brain now.
Well, you're so smart and wise, and now we have some of yours.
Yeah.
Oh, stop.
Yeah.
Well, one question we always finish with, and we neglected to ask, is your immediate future. What are your plans? What are you going to be doing for the next year or 3 years or whatever it is? And maybe give us an overview of that.
Yeah, so I just graduated high school like 3 weeks ago. So that's thank you. That's a big thing. And I'm taking a gap year and I'm gonna do some work and some travel, and then I'm gonna go to college.
Where are
So,
you headed? Where are you going to college? Do you know?
sort of. I kind of applied to a lot of schools and then I committed to a lot of schools. So I committed to U of O, and I committed to George Washington in DC, um, Sarah Lawrence in New York, and then I got into McAllister in Minnesota. I'm thinking probably it's gonna be Sarah Lawrence in New York, but yeah.
Well, we have great options. That's great.
Yeah, that was a
And
great.
wherever you go, it's lucky to have you. So
Well, thank you.
Congratulations.
Yeah.
Thanks.
And thank you for all the work you're doing.
Thank you for all the work you're doing.
That's why we're all here together.
Yay!
Nice. Yeah. And before we sign off, just to stay in touch. And if you can promote what we're doing, Radically Human, that would be interesting. And if you know of anybody that might make a good guest on our show, please put us in touch because we're looking forward to talking to anybody who can shed some light on our predicament right now. So,
100%.
yeah,
Yeah, I'll keep an
good.
ear and eye out.
Yeah, good, good.
thanks so much, Amelia.
Thank you guys.